this video today, we're going to discuss chapters 23, 24, and 30, which are on early Latin America, Africa, the Atlantic slave trade, the Middle Passage, and then the Latin American Revolution, which were all sparked by the Age of Discovery, including the Renaissance, the Reformation, Scientific Revolution, and all of those were contributed to the Latin America rise to power, which was during the time of Ferdinand de Aragon and Isabella of Castile. And we're just going to talk about the causes and effects of the Atlantic slave trade on African society. The reconquest of Granada led to the motivation of the Spanish conquest of the New World. And basically, Isabella and Ferdinand wanted to take control internally and externally. And internally, they wanted to create unification. And by unification, they wanted to create Catholicism as the official religion.
And then that led to the Inquisition, where Isabella and Ferdinand wanted unification throughout their country. And so they wanted everyone to convert to Catholicism. And if you didn't convert to Catholicism, you would either get kicked out or they would kill you. So the Jews, they had to convert them to Catholicism and all other religions. And then that led to big unification, and also there was economic decline because a lot of people didn't like the idea of having to convert because they didn't want to convert. So a lot of people left, and there's population decrease, and then it led to...
In the New World, the indigenous populations were exploited very badly by the Spanish conquistadors. In 1512, the encomienda system was created, which is a system of forced labor of the indigenous population by the Spanish conquistadors. And this led into the Mina system, which was another system of forced labor. But this system mobilized workers into mines and stuff, and they eventually started to work for wage labor.
Okay, so many of these abuses resulted in having the people leave from their villages, and the wage labor systems in which the natives worked for wages, they had to go on Spanish-owned mines and farms or in the cities. So overall, these indigenous people, it was very abusive to them, and they suffered greatly.
So the Europeans turned to Africa for slaves because it was easier for them, and they used their advantage of the world economy to go to Africa and expand themselves to get slaves. And then in the New World, when they brought the slaves back, it was easier to use slaves for sugar plantations and mines because they required hard work and labor. And it also benefited the African economy because they brought in money and more trade into Africa from Europe.
So during this time, racial attitude and gender aspects started to play a major role. Men were seen to be more superior because people thought that they were stronger and also more to be for the labor work. During the Trans-Saharan, they mostly wanted women against the Atlantic trade slave when they wanted men.
So from the Atlantic slave trade came the Columbian Exchange, and the Columbian Exchange benefited Europe mostly because it killed out the populations of the Taino people. And although it brought trade and it boosted the economy of Europe, this did not benefit the slaves and the Taino people, as I said. And
Well, in Africa, there was a shift of the locus of power. On the coast, the kingdoms tried to monopolize the slave trade, but that failed. And the Western and Central African kingdoms of Asante and Dahomey were more successful because they had access to European goods such as guns and horses. And they started to dominate the slave trade in Africa, and they benefited from that a lot.
The African diaspora was dispersion from Africans from their homelands. They were separated from family, friends, and were forced to march down into an interior trading town or to the slave pens on the coast. On the way, 1/3 of the Africans died, either in the pens or on the boats, and the boats held up to 700 people. This was a great way for cultural diffusion to occur.
So, building off what Tony had said, that was the Middle Passage. So the Middle Passage was a slave voyage from Africa to the Americas, where a bunch of slaves were put on these ships to transport them to the Americas, where they would work on plantations or in mines or just do a bunch of labor work. on this voyage, they would interact with a bunch of diseases. They were very unsanitary. They weren't taken care of. It was not a good place to be. But on that voyage, they were able to maintain their culture, and they also learned the culture of a bunch of other Africans. So basically, the Middle Passage did not strip any Africans of their culture.
So basically, Maria was talking about the Middle Passage, and from the Middle Passage, the Atlantic slave trade, this all resulted in a system of castas, which was a hierarchical system in the Americas, which placed the Europeans on the top, obviously, white supremacy, and which was established then and has been carried out
Through the white man's
throughout
burden.
history. The white man's burden, yes. White man's burden has been carried out throughout history, and unfortunately will never die out. So anyway, under the Europeans is the Creoles, and the Creoles are Spanish citizens that were born in America. Under the Creoles is mestizos and mulattoes, and they're pretty much half and half. So they're also born in America as well, and under the mestizos are obviously the slaves.
Okay, so in America, there was a ratio between men to women with the slaves. So there was 3 men to 1 woman, and that made family building very hard. But African culture did not die out, as we stated before. It was structured by continuity and change, and this is the development of the Afro-American culture. And they kept their languages, they formed new religions, they had their own cultures, their own dress, their own dances, their own everything. They adapted, and they also kept their traditional African cultures. And now, some slaves ran away, and they formed runaway slave societies, and one of those is Palmares. And the slave trade continued all the way up until 1888, when it ended in Brazil. There are 4 major causes of revolution and rebellion in Latin America. The first is the American Revolution, which functioned as a framework for all of these revolutions. The next is the French Revolution, but that was considered to be too radical, but it was still inspiration for a lot of these Latin American countries. Third was the confused Iberian political situation after the Napoleonic Wars. The politics were really messed up. No one knew who the true kings were, so there's a lot of confusion there. And the fourth reason is the Haitian Revolution. Now, the Haitian Revolution occurred in 1791 on the French colony of Saint Domingue, and it was led by a slave rebellion by Toussaint L'Ouverture. And the Republic of Haiti was formed, and it served as a symbol of hope and freedom for all the other Latin American countries.
So in 1810, a rebellion in Mexico broke out under Father Miguel de Hidalgo, and basically he called on the mestizos, and under the Creole leader Iturbide, the Mexicans were successful, and Mexico City was taken over, and in 1821, Iturbide became the emperor.
Okay, now in South America, Simon Bolivar emerged as the leader of the revolutionary forces. Between 1817 and 1822, he defeated the Spanish forces in Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. And by 1824, the revolutionary leader San Martin carried the revolution to Peru. And by 1825, all of the Spanish in South America had independence.
So Brazil was able to achieve independence in many different ways. The first was when the Portuguese royal family, they fled because of the Napoleonic Wars, and they went to Brazil. And then in Brazil, they opened up a bunch of ports for international commerce. And then when the king left Brazil, the king's son proclaimed independence on Brazil, and then Brazil became a monarchy under Dom Pedro I.
And it was the only monarchy in Latin America. Everyone else was a republic.
To sum everything up, Latin America and Africa increased expansion, trading connections, and goods. The desire for slaves made African Americans a target. The expansion of Latin America was done under Ferdinand and Isabella.
This led to the Columbian Exchange, the Middle Passage, and the African diaspora in the Americas. The Africans learned to continue and adapt their culture, while the Columbian Exchange decimated Indian populations. And in Latin America, revolutions occurred.